Okay, now this one has a chance to be the longest video I've ever created. I'm going to talk about the Southern Reach Trilogy by Jeff VanderMeer today. And I'm going to talk about the first two books because I only got through about one and a half. I have a lot to say about both of them, and I think they belong in the same video because I have very strong feelings on both sides. So let's start with the first one. I read Annihilation, the first book in the Southern Reach Trilogy by Jeff VanderMeer. It's the final book that I read in 2021. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I wrote this after reading. I have lamented many times here on Goodreads about how I don't like series books or trilogies, and that for a series to win me over, its first book has to be captivating and really hook on to something special in me to inspire me to read more volumes. This one was perfect for me in that. One such series in my past is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. I'm a huge fan of The Gunslinger, its first volume. Most people see it as a toss-away preamble to the character depth and story qualities of the later pieces. But Annihilation reminded me of The Gunslinger in that it feels incomplete in all the right ways for the first of a series. It makes me want to know more while not leaving me hanging in a negative way. It closed a chapter for its main character perfectly for me. And while I have no clue what the next steps in the Southern Reach Trilogy will be, or even in which format they will be presented, I am all in for the full series. Hypnotism and control are major themes here, so if those feel charlatanish or like a story cop-out, then you may not like this. But the layered descriptions of the shocking supernatural environment somehow were both appropriately vivid and subtle at the same time in this book. As the reader, you can feel present in the story experience while only tangibly understanding as little as our characters know. Ultimately, the aspect that sold me most here was the fantastically intimate first-person account of science fiction by an unreliable narrator. I'm so excited to see what VanderMeer does with these. I read it in 4 days. That's a very big deal for me. I'm going to see the movie before moving on as well, and we'll see how that translates. I did watch the movie, and I recommend the movie as well. This book was fantastic for me. It was so exciting and so perfectly incomplete. I mentioned that a little bit here in the review, and I think it is exactly the kind of taster that I want in any kind of series books to keep me moving on. I loved all of the imagery. I was sucked in to every bit of the storytelling and all of the great, creepy, and beautiful descriptions of everything. I was in it the whole way. Now, the movie is a little bit different. Because you have the visual aspect to it, there isn't that sort of tantalizing incompleteness that you get from the book, but it's wonderful in all kinds of different ways. And it really does tell the story a little bit differently too. As someone who is not a big fan of horror as a genre, I actually really liked the movie even though I was scared through most of it. And I had read the book, but the story goes a little bit different and you feel intimate to the characters in a different kind of way when you're watching it. Moving around here on Goodreads to try and figure out if I actually made it one of my favorites. And I didn't list it in this case. And that might be because of how strongly I felt about the book too. Now, I mentioned in this review that I'm all in for all the books, and then I hint at the idea of if hypnotism feels like a cop-out, that you might not want to read this book. Well, that's a little bit of foreshadowing for some of the difficulty I had with book 2, the next one. Book 2 in the Southern Reach Trilogy is called Authority. I tried to read Authority in 2024, so 3 years after I had read Annihilation. I was very excited about it because I was, as I mentioned in that review, all in for the series. But this one I gave 2 out of 5 stars and I stopped reading it, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm putting this one down because of the general negativity I feel for it as I transition from the long doldrums of the first parts of it to the haunting section that most reviews on Goodreads talk about being the heart of interest in the book. Reading back my 5-star review of Annihilation, which I just read to you, clues me in to how the whole experience has unfolded for me with Authority. I loved the first book because it felt like an incomplete show and tell that clued the reader into exciting, important aspects of the primary story in an effort to gain momentum towards revealing wild experiences that were only partially informed by those clues. The incomplete show felt crafted well to sustain interest and propel readers ahead for more of the good stuff. But even there, I caveated that the primary story mechanic of control and hypnotism could be interpreted as a literary cop-out. For me, authority left behind the good and trucked only with the bad. The first 200 pages are dulled by recounting the manipulated experiences of an investigator's human resources desk work. And the final piece begins to explain his unraveling at the discovery of his manipulation. I'm going to list this review with spoilers, but I don't know if that's true because hypnotism is such a central mechanic to the fiction of these books. Maybe it's a testament to the brilliance of VanderMeer's writing that he tells this story so connected to Control's experience of monotony to discovery. Control is the name of the main character in Authority. I can give it that because authority feels like manipulation. It's easy to be scared of the idea that we are being controlled by something or someone else. But I'm more interested in seeking out stories in fiction where characters embody a first-person experience rather than ultimately be pulled apart by discovering the horror of the deus ex machina that makes up their lives. Lovers of this series are likely buoyed through this book by the excitement of the potential that is sampled in book one. A reader's own creativity and interest make a book like Authority possible as a book too. Unfortunately, this is why so commonly series books and to be continueds are not good fits for me. I can respect what is going on here, but I know it's not my preference. And now reading this back, it actually sounds tamer than I remember in my mind. I remember being so angry with Authority for a couple different reasons. And some of them have come out on this channel because I talk about in series books that really I'm looking for a through line that is going to be propelled. And the perspective here is very different than in Annihilation. It is a completely separate experience of the same supernatural phenomenon. It's taken with different characters and in a different way. And I knew that going in, but I was still so interested by the way that the first story was told that I wanted to try to experience it in this new and different way. The manipulation part that I mentioned so deeply here, I struggled with those early pages and they really felt like work. And then when the major part of the twist or the unraveling was the fact that those pages were just a farce was so hard for me as a reader. I feel like I kind of took it personally because I was so burdened with those early pages, and then to turn and say that those early pages were not a real burden. I wanted some sort of recognition for my work, some sort of aspect of it that made the first part worth reading to me. Now, that is sort of the key thing that made me so angry about it, because it really did feel like Deus Ex Machina to me in that we were told a whole thing and then it was going to be explained why everything we were told was not right. It really bothered me. It made me angry in reading it. But there's a second part of that too. I've mentioned it on this channel before as well. There's a certain aspect of Mindbenders that is sometimes disorienting to me. And I love Mindbenders. I love stories where they force you to reconsider your reality. But when you spend so much time with this character, this main character, and then learn that the reality that you've been told is completely a lie, that actually played on the uncomfortable parts of my disorientation with Mindbenders. It put me in a position where I was questioning whether I should be reading this or not. The first book was definitely not like that. The first book forced me to question my reality in a way that felt playful and interesting and still scary, still creepy, but also not in a way that isolated me from the experiences that I was reading about. This book potentially made me so angry because it scared me even more. And that's something to be said for this. Now, the other key thing is that I was so gung-ho after reading the first one. And if someone could convince me to maybe read a synopsis of the rest of Authority and then push on to something next, I would love to hear it. I would love to have that discussion with somebody. But at this point, I got so angry and scared to some degree as well that I put it down, and I actually gave it in like a public library for my building here because I didn't want to think about it anymore. It made me so frustrated and scared and upset. I definitely recommend Annihilation. It was a fantastic book, wonderfully creepy. I made it through, I said, in 4 days. I mean, that is shocking and wonderful and special. Authority took me a really long time to get through the boring, hypnotic sections at the beginning. And again, I'm concerned that these are spoilers. There's going to be a big twist. if you can grind through that type of frustration to get to a big twist that you won't take personally and you won't get scared by, then maybe this is the right next step for you. But this is one that I got so excited about, a series that I got so excited about after reading the first one, and then had to sadly put the second one down. And I haven't come back to it. I can be swayed, but at this point, I feel justified in my decision. Okay, so the trilogy, the Southern Reach Trilogy by Jeff VanderMeer. I read Annihilation in 2021 and gave it 5 stars. Then turned around, started Authority, got through 60% of it, maybe, but I had to stop. And I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I'm reading other things now. And there's still some mind benders in there. Stuff that scares me in the way that I want to be scared. See Annihilation, read Annihilation, and then let me know what you think, and if more of this in a different kind of way is something that is interesting to you. Till next.